that would help us to identify everyone who is here. So welcome everyone. On behalf of ELSA, the English Language Schools Association, I'd like to welcome everyone to our first webinar. We're very excited. We hope that this is going to be the first, but not the last, the first of many to come. So thank you for joining us. My name is Anthony McDermott. I'm actually the chair of the Teacher Development Day Committee. And I'd like to take the opportunity to ask you to put down the date of the 13th of March, 2021 in your diaries, because this is going to be our big Teacher Development Day annual event. And we hope that many of you will join us. We'll have more information about that coming soon. And I'm very excited to introduce Greg Murray, who is going to be our first presenter. And he's a developmental psychologist. He has experience in teaching at university level and at secondary level. He has taught both in the United States and also in France. He's also founder of Adaptive Edge Coaching. And today he is going to be talking to us about identity development in adolescence. I should also mention his credentials. He has a master's from Harvard in human development and psychology, and he also has a bachelor's in sociology from the University of Pennsylvania. So we're very, very happy to welcome him. Over to Greg. Thank you very much, Greg.
Thanks, Anthony, and thank you, ELSA, everybody, for having me. Welcome, everybody. Looking forward to a really positive meeting here about identity development in adolescence, which is a hugely important issue. And I know you guys know that, which is why you're here. So I've got my email up here, and I just want to say, I'll be answering questions throughout, but if anyone has questions afterwards or feels intrigued by any topic that I cover, I totally love talking about this stuff. So feel free to contact me. And so, yeah, while we get started here, I'd like to know who's in the room and what you guys teach and stuff. So please go ahead and type in the chat box. What is your content? And what is the age range of students that you teach? So I can also kind of know who's in the room and give some targeted examples and things like that. So if you can do that, just head over to the chat and type that in. I'll again just kind of run through my track. Anthony gave me a nice introduction, but I started my career in Teach for America right out of college, and I spent 7 years teaching secondary in the States. I taught literature as well as social science in a lot of different areas. I was in the urban inner city to start, and then I kind of bounced back and forth between suburbs, working class, and then inner city again. So I've worked with adolescents the whole time. I really have a soft spot in my heart for this age group that's going through so much change, as you guys all know. So that's what motivated me to get the degree in developmental psychology at the Ed School at Harvard, to really learn about what makes people change, learn and grow over the lifespan. And so that's what I focused on there, and moved here to Lyon in France with my partner. She's doing a PhD here. I taught at Lazarus at the college for a little while before starting my own business doing adult development, where I focus on identity and emotion. And I'm also at the business EM Lyon, working with emerging adults, as they call them, adolescents, emerging adults. So really passionate about this topic, and look forward to sharing with you guys. Here's the questions that you can expect to kind of get answered today. Why focus on identity in adolescence? I hope that at the end of the session, you'll really have a great passion and desire to really make identity central to the educational experience of your students. So that will be from developmental psychology. Next is how are we defining, measuring, and analyzing identity. That will be social psychology. And then I'll get into a little bit about what the research says in educational psychology right now about identity development. From a structural standpoint, how can a school make the environment and teachers in their classroom make the environment healthy for identity development, and then also with curriculum design. I'll end there, and then you guys will have time at the end very briefly to kind of hypothesize, brainstorm what this might look like in your classroom. So Big themes though that you'll notice throughout are emotions, a lot of emotions involved in the identity processes, trust, learning, change, and exploration. Exploration is probably the biggest one. All right, so I'll be doing a lot of research up front. I do have intervals where I'll stop and check for questions and things. So definitely feel free to put questions in the chat. Also, you can raise your hand when I stop and break for questions, you can raise your hand. And then at the end, you'll be having a little bit of time, maybe 7-8 minutes to brainstorm based on like an assignment that I'm going to give. And then you'll have group work at the end, just really a chat to consolidate the learning. All right, so as I said, we're going to start with developmental psychology and just talk about why it is so important to focus on identity in adolescence. So Robert Keegan is a professor of learning and human development at Harvard, where I studied, and he has this constructed developmental stage theory where he measured that people go through 5 stages in life, and it's based on a subject-object theory of how we process the world on cognitive, interpersonal, and intrapersonal measures. And so one example is a child at age 2 is subject to their impulses, for example. And now this is intrapersonal. They think that their impulses are them. They don't know that they can control them. They don't know that they are separate from them. And then they reach around that age 2 and their mind changes and they realize, oh, I can control my impulses. They are outside of me. They're object. Okay. And now in his stage theory, there's all of these types of things from stages 1 to 5 on these measures of cognitive, interpersonal, intrapersonal. Identity is interpersonal. So I'll show you an example here. So stage 2, which starts at around age 6, the child is subject to their point of view, meaning they don't think it's something that they have. They don't think they have a point of view. They think their point of view is the world point of view. And then they reach a point when that becomes object. All right. And now they're in stage 3, which he calls the socialized mind. And this is adolescence, where the point of view is object. I can tell now that Anthony sees the world different from me. He sees me differently from me, for example. And now I'm subject to role consciousness and mutuality. I recognize the duality here in the point of view of myself and everybody's self. I recognize that. And I also put the intrapersonal line. I'm subject now to self-consciousness too. So it's quite a change, actually. And I know that you guys know this, teaching adolescents, it's like the lights turn on. So it's quite overwhelming, I think. And one of my big goals for my career is to teach adolescents exactly what is going on with their mind. I think it's an injustice that we don't tell them, honestly, because there's a lot of emotions involved and it's pretty chaotic. So that's Keegan's. I also have a couple other stage theorists here. This is Erik Erikson. He has 8 stages of psychosocial development, and I'm just going to show you 4. Stage 3 is preschoolers. He calls it initiative versus guilt. This is when it's all about initiating tasks, or they feel guilty that they're not independent. The next one is industry versus inferiority. So this is again about applying yourself, working hard, and things like that, or they feel inferior. And then again, he has identity versus confusion, and this is adolescence. So again, we have a theorist who's recognized the centrality of identity when a person reaches adolescence. And here he's saying the goal in a person's life is to gain a sense of self by testing roles and integrating them into their identity, or they risk becoming confused and depressed and things like that. And so one more stage theorist, and I'm just going to show you, this is moral development. This is also coming out of Harvard, and this is Kohlberg. And, in the earlier stages here, it talks about how we avoid punishment and then we seek reward. And then we are oriented towards rules. And then when we reach the teens, it's all about mutual benefit. And we have this awareness that morally right and legally right are not the same. So the rules, we realize that we decide what's right and wrong. And so we have to develop that moral code. So this is again, identity, moral identity, where we're deciding. So put them all in a line. we've got quite a task now for adolescents. Again, the lights are turned on. They're realizing, well, the way that this person sees me may not be how I see myself. I have to develop my own sense of right or wrong, and I have to try on all these different hats. So the school should be supporting this, and that's what I aim to show you how to do today. So next I'll talk about emotions, and this is very stressful. I can't, you know, adults go through identity processes when we get married, have a child, get divorced, go through life changes, anything, grieving. So imagine like an adolescent who's really never had these types of processes go on. So how does identity affect emotion? The biggest thing is verification. So this is coming out of social psychology in the States. They talk about identity verification a lot, where if our actions, if our identity, what we believe about ourselves, if our actions are recognized, we feel positive emotions. So if someone recognizes me as a father or as a teacher and respects me and things like that, I'll feel positive emotions. They also talk about happiness. And so if we're feeling positive emotions from identity verification, it also says that this will shape your identity. So the longer lasting happiness that I have with a reinforced identity, well, then the more likely I am to invoke that identity across different situations. And so it has to do with salience and just how I feel about myself. So you can see how it's socially constructed, and we aim to feel good, obviously. It's also important to think about as a teacher that the rate of progress matters. If you're having students changing identity, trying on different hats, it's kind of common sense, but moving faster than expected, it's shown, results in more positive emotions. And then moving slower, obviously, is more negative emotions. So it's just interesting, and it's something to think about. It's something that's been measured and validated widely. So it's good to think about up front. Now, a big part of the literature is threat. It can feel very threatening to try on different hats, to not get your identity recognized, and to get your identity straight up threatened. And we know this as adults. And so again, with adolescents doing this for the first time, it's a lot of emotion. You know, I'm just citing a bunch of research here that coming from different areas, sociology, psychology. This last one here, they're measuring emotion with EEG machines, and they're doing identity processes, confirming, disconfirming, non-verifying, and they're noticing that people have innate coping mechanisms for this stuff. So it's really a big part of our mind and a big part of how we experience the world, and it's a very emotional process. So it can be pretty destabilizing to explore and not get recognized, not be seen, and things like that. So whenever we're talking about emotions, obviously we're going to talk about depression and anxiety and things like that. So this meta-analysis indicates stronger identity commitment, which means that you know who you are, you commit to this identity, and you're confident in it. It's higher self-esteem, and lower commitment is related to lower self-esteem. There's also a lot of literature about eating disorders specifically, and that's a major problem with adolescents, specifically girls, and it's something that I really want to work to reduce. It's another main reason why I want to do this in the schools, is because when adolescent girls feel identity confusion, it's very, very highly correlated with eating disorders. And once a person has an eating disorder or depression or all of these things, then they have identity disturbance too. And so it's harder once you have an identity disturbance to, again, go through a healthy exploration process. So all the more reason to do it up front. So I'm just trying to say this is why we do this. Another thing to think about, I think this research is really interesting, actually. Vignola is coming out of Sussex, and she researched multiculturally, Eastern society, Western society, both, that we have 6 motives related to our identity. And so esteem, obviously, when we want to feel good about ourselves, when we look in the mirror. Continuity, I want to have some sense of linearity in my life from when I was a child to a teenager to now to when I'm older. I want to, that linearity, that narrative identity that we all seek. Distinctiveness, I want to feel like I'm different. I want to feel like I have some position in society, that I'm separate a little bit. Subjective meaning, I want to feel like my life is meaningful. Efficacy, it has to do with control, and then belonging. So you can imagine, again, how emotional these things are. If you get these motives met, then you're going to feel good. If you don't, and you'll feel lonely, you'll feel this efficacy one, lack of control, is very, very disturbing if someone feels they cannot control their environment. So it's quite interesting, and it's quite important. Another really important thing to know here is just, how do we define identity? What do I mean when I say identity? And I mean that we have many identities, like a lot. But the researchers have put them into 4 categories: role identity, group identity, social and personal identity, which is also kind of associated with values. And you'll see in a second, they're associated with specific esteem types. So always associated with emotion. When you think identity, you should automatically be thinking emotion as well. So role identities are the most historically researched. And it says here, the meanings that individuals attach to themselves while in roles in the social structure: student, friend, worker, brother, father, all of these things. It focuses on doing. What is the expectation in this role? And again, it's society that defines this. Society has told us what is a good student, what is a good father. So it's socially constructed. We do have a say, but it's really important to know that this dictates behavior to a great degree. Social identity, I think this is actually what people think of when someone says the word identity. They think social identity, right? At least that's my experience when I'm speaking to people about this stuff. So this includes like your generation, your age, race, ethnicity, gender, and this is kind of how we approach strangers too, right? Like based on what we see in the media or what we've seen, in everyday life, we associate certain behaviors and how it says here how they should be treated based on their identity and their appearance. So it's really important, and I think some of the younger generations are working hard to, and everybody is, to work hard to break stereotypes and things like that. But social identity is a big one. Group identity, it's just how it sounds. It's the groups you're a part of, and that primarily comes from the family. But you grow up and then you have, friend circles, work cliques, things like that. And people want to behave a certain way because they're now part of this group, and it means something. For me, it means something to be a Murray. It means something to be, in this work group of these colleagues that I'm in. I'm representing this as well. And then person identities. This is all about being distinct, being different. How am I different from others? Okay, well, I'm hardworking, or I'm a moral person, or I'm an environmentalist. It's this personal identity that, again, is often associated with values, but it's how I define myself as different. And it also, you see here, it says they're thought to act as master identities, meaning that if I feel that I'm a moral person, well, I'm going to try to be that way in my group identity, my role identity, and all of them. So it's an important one that I think should be focused on in school, especially. All right. So you guys you'll be getting a handout with all of this stuff too. But all right. Salience and activation, I'm just going to go over very quickly, but basically it means that the probability that an identity will be invoked or activated in a social interaction determines its salience. So, I'm a male and I'm very clearly male. So it's going to be highly salient in my identity. And it's going to be more central. And so it's this type of thing that the more salient the identity, the more likely to be activated. And people, if they have salient identities, they seek to activate them, right? If they get positively reinforced in one situation, then they'll behave in ways where that identity comes out in other situations too. All right. So it's linked to esteem, and I find this really, really interesting because, especially with my coaching and stuff, I find that people are pretty clear if they're feeling down or feeling low. They're pretty clear about, like, especially, between efficacy and worth. So I'll just start from the top here. The personal identity is associated with the esteem of authenticity, of having meaning, feeling like your life has a purpose, and you understand yourself, why you're here. It's that personal identity. The role identities are highly associated with efficacy. Remember, role identity is all about doing things and doing them well. And so, do you have capability? Like, do you have control over your environment? If you don't have that, you feel helpless, and it's very, very, it's a bad feeling. And then the group identities is the worth. The self-worth comes from the family, and then peer groups too, in adolescence especially. But you talk to somebody, and if they're feeling low, they're pretty clear about which one of these three is affecting them, and then you can kind of help them by doing this identity work. All right. Resources. I'm going to skip over for time. Signs and symbols. All right. So I'll pause here. Well, I guess just quickly, how am I doing on time? I'll just say the main idea here is that resources help to verify your identity. And so you see here, it says objects and processes that support identity meaning. So for example, if you're a student, well, you need a notebook, you need a pencil, and this is a very basic example. But it's the resources that are at play here. You can't just decide you want to be a certain identity without thinking about, the resources that will help you get confirmed there. And then we've got personal, interpersonal, and structural resources. So these are kind of like social skills as well, become resources. And signs, symbols, and meaning. You can see here a sign is a non-arbitrary association, such as flushing as a sign of embarrassment. Symbol, most things are symbols. Even language is a symbol. We assign meaning to the words, and we agree that they mean these things. So same thing with wearing a ring, it symbolizes commitment. Same thing with all of these identities. Same thing with wearing a brand name, Nike, that means I'm an athlete, right? It's things like that. So there's symbols, and all of these things help to confirm and disconfirm our identity. I see a question here. Will you share the PowerPoint? Yes, I will. All right, cool. Yeah, so we use signs and symbols to make meaning. All right, so any questions at this point right now? I'm just going to pause before, see if there's any questions.
There's a question in the chat for you, Greg.
Yeah, what does this mean? LAIC country, LAIC? Is that the one you're looking at too?
A secular country. Okay,
secular, non-religious. Yeah, it's the same. Signs and symbols. It's not, doesn't have to be associated with religion, although I see what you mean, like a cross or something like could be a religious symbol.
No,
but
in terms of identity, like in France especially, we have a very large Muslim community that wants to identify with their religion, and they can't because they're not allowed to. How, as adolescents, do you then bridge that gap? Because if legally they're not supposed to have any form of symbol or sign of whatever, and yet they identify with being this thing, and then how are they supposed to, quote unquote, you see what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting, and like it's a similar debate.
I don't want to get political, but I just want to.
No, I totally get what you mean. It's tough because they want to define themselves, and they should be able to, in my opinion. But the religion thing, it's definitely political. Same in the States, children wear uniforms. They can't express themselves. It's rough, but yeah, that's a tough one. All right, that is a good question. Maybe worth another whole webinar. All right, next one, we're going to talk about statuses and processing styles. So the whole idea here is that psychologists have measured how people move through this exploration cycle of trying on different hats. You remember Erickson, he said identity versus confusion. So this is how they're measuring these things. And so two of the statuses they're high in commitment. And the first one is called identity achievement. It's the best one. It's the one that you do want your students to be at, but it's like the ultimate goal. This is when they've arrived at commitments via exploratory process. So they've decided, I've tried to be an athlete, I've tried to be a dancer, I've tried to be whatever it is. These are just examples, but they've really tried these things, healthfully reflected, and they've committed. The next one is called foreclosure. It's also high in commitment, but they're just, they don't like the uncertainty. So they just commit without exploration. And so they're usually taking on identities that maybe older siblings have or parents have assigned or things like that. And so you'll notice that your students have these patterns. And for some people, it's very uncomfortable to go through the identity exploration process. And some people don't like the uncertainty. So they'll just take these commitments without exploration. The next one that's a low degree of commitment, high degree of exploration is called moratoriums. And they struggle to reach commitment and define themselves. And the research says that they tend to ruminate. Who am I going to be when I get older? Who am I? I don't understand, how to define myself. They bounce around maybe to different social groups. And it's stressful. These ones, moratoriums, it says that end up in counseling a lot. So it's, exploration is healthy to a point. And then there's diffusions. And this is, if you see a student in diffusion, you really want to try to work with them to encourage them to explore more, to encourage them to feel safe, actually, because these are people who are avoiding the process altogether, and their lack of commitment, and they get easily swayed by external influences. So again, this is, you can really support these students. And this will be in the handout as well. But I made this graph as well. You can see how it's just degrees of commitment and exploration. And you can see at the bottom here, this is the pattern that it follows from avoidance and no exploration, no commitment, to foreclosure, to moratorium, to achievement. So it's pretty interesting that they've measured this stuff longitudinally over time and watched people change. And I think it's fascinating. This is another graph that they've designed about exploration. So if you can think about a person like choosing a major in college, we tend to encourage them, take all the classes, take all the intro classes, then make a commitment and explore one in depth or explore two in depth, and then make your ultimate commitment. And so that's kind of how it goes. And it's pretty interesting to encourage people to do that type of thing. Exploration and breadth is healthy, but not too much, because the moratoriums, you get very stressed. So this is the stages and the cycle. And another thing is, I just want to mention, the degree to which these kids today are going to be dealing with change in their life is drastically more than even I can imagine right now. And like exponentially more than, my parents' generation or anything like that. So technology is changing the world. It's rapid. It's the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, all of that stuff. So it's really important to help people, help these kids in this way. So now we'll talk a little more about processing styles. And again, they're measuring how people move through this identity exploration process. And you can see, like, I chose this picture because it's true. Some kids are like so carefree, so happy to explore on the different hats. Oh God. My cats are waking up. And then some are terrified because there's a lot of uncertainty. Who am I? What do you mean? Who am I? I don't know. So it's like, it can be pretty scary for some. So the first style that I'll tell you about here is informational. This is, again, the best one. If you want to, you can tell there's one that you would prefer to be. It's the informational side. They seek out, they process, and they really go after the information and reflect on it. The next one is normative. And this is, again, they're prescribed by others. So they'll take on what their friends are doing. They don't like uncertain feelings. It's like processing style. The next one is diffuse avoidance. This stuff scares them a lot, and they don't want to be bothered with it. And they make a lot of excuses, and they externalize everything. It's not me. I didn't control that. That wasn't me. So this is diffuse avoidant. So this is pretty consistent and measured longitudinally as well. All right. I'm going to try to speed up. All right. So I might skip some stuff, but basically reflection versus rumination is a big part of the exploration process, because exploration can be healthy. It can foster curiosity and openness, or it can lead to depression if you do it too much, if you ruminate too much. So it's something to think about. And I've got some quotes here. just supporting what I'm saying. Again, I'm going to move a little bit faster here, and you'll get the slides after.
Greg, one of the questions, there's a question in the chat actually, which might be linked with that slide.
What kinds of exploration would you recommend to foster healthy development? Yes, we'll talk about in the very end. We're going to talk about that. It's really specific. But I'll move through the parental thing. I thought you guys might like to see this. There's so much research that says that the more parents try to control who their child is, what they're going to be in life, the harder it is for the child once they get to around age 18 to 25, that emerging adulthood. It's very, very difficult. And this is like longitudinally tested. So I'm just going to move through that, but it's something that you can think about. Cultural identity is one that I came across that I thought this group might be interested in as well. And I was chatting with somebody in the thing here. And with globalization, the internet has changed identity development when it comes to culture. Kids can get on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, and see people from Japan, see what culture is like. They can make friends all over the world. So much less isolated, and they get to choose, you know. And I know, especially in this international school setting, maybe with multicultural parents, and I know that phrase third generation or third culture kids, it can be really positive, or again, lead to anxiety, depression. But these are the stages that people go through with cultural identity development. Assimilation is when a person does not want to maintain their previous culture and they want to embrace the new culture. Then you have separation. Persons place value on holding on to their own culture, avoiding the new one. Integration, combining the two. Or then marginalization, where they let go of the old one, but they're not accepted by the new one. So it's something to think about for immigrants especially, but for multicultural children as well. It's interesting. All right, questions here. All right, now we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how does this look? What can we do as educators to ensure healthy identity development? You see this girl, right? She's reading, she's an athlete, and she's representing herself in multiple ways. There are structural factors that contribute to healthy identity development. And as teachers, you may have control over some of this stuff or may not. And I've taken it from these articles down here. Really, a lot of the literature shows this is a matter of attachment. So if you think about some of these diffuse avoidant students and some of the students who really don't like to explore, they may just need some healthy attachment. So they know if I try on a hat and it doesn't work, I can go back, I can return, right? I have this adult in the building who sees me whether I change or not. So it's really interesting. And another thing is spaces for congregation. There's a bunch of articles about how you can design schools to have healthy identity development, where it's like, for example, like a cafeteria with a teacher's lounge next to it where they can see them, but they're separate. So supervision with a degree of independence is shown to be really good for identity development as well. Small class sizes, of course, better relationships, regular mentorship. So I know in the States we had homeroom where the kids had the same group every morning. We had advisory in some schools where kids, it's like a home base for these kids to come every day. This is very good for identity development. You can do specific things. And then of course, extracurricular activities, the learning between the margin, all these things. If a student is seen in multiple ways at school, the more they'll feel safe exploring and things like that, the more they feel seen. So this is structural stuff. Now we'll get into the pedagogy a little bit. And so this article, Identity Processes and Transformative Pedagogy. We as educators are agents of identity formation. And so what is transformative pedagogy? It's helping students to basically think independently, challenge their beliefs, values, and knowledge, and always connecting things to their life and challenging the status quo, essentially. And a little bit more on that. What's the difference between transformative and transaction? So transaction is good teaching, but they're saying not good enough. they're saying, active thinking, problem solving techniques, asking questions, posing answers in the community. So there's social learning, but the teachers are seen as more as facilitators and students are responsible for active participation. So this sounds like, honestly, excellent, sounds like excellent teaching. But what they're saying is that it's missing the independence piece, the self-driven piece, where the student is not on their own, but thinking independently and setting their own learning goals. So the transformation pedagogy you see here says, first, to the art of teaching that emphasizes mutual learning between educator and student. The student-centered pedagogy is practiced. So the teacher is changing as well. The students are teaching the teacher about their culture, their identities, and the teacher is learning as well. I know personally, this is how I went in with the adolescents. I don't know what it's like to walk in their shoes. So I think they really appreciate it if they're able to talk about themselves and able, to have their teacher feel like, wow, they're learning something about their music interests, their cultures, all these things. And so I have some examples that I'll show later as well. Identity control theory. This is widely researched. This is really exciting stuff, actually. But it's saying that day-to-day interactions, like the micro interactions that take place is what actually reinforces your identity over time. So it's really important to be aware that all of your interactions that you're having with a student is developing their identity. So, social feedback, it's saying, and there's another one. Remember, so they're constantly, I just want to put this back in context. They're understanding point of view for the first time, essentially. So they're constantly thinking, what does this person think of me? Whether they're going to say it or not, they're incredibly vulnerable because of this. It's for the first time they're understanding approval in this way, point of view in this way, and they're trying to match their behavior to fit how they want you to see them. So if you can tell a student wants to be seen a certain way, go ahead, give them that reinforcement. They're craving it. And so, again, not control. I've already talked about how parental control leads to negative outcomes. So it's more about questioning, these are some of the examples that were in the literature. You can also do this in subtle ways. Comments on papers and tests, homework assignments, just little things like that. Again, just making it identity based. All right, student choice and voice. So this is something I'll show you in the examples that I have about how students can really drive the learning and make it identity based. So it says here, they don't create the objectives. They still will have learning objectives, but they don't create the entire assignment. And it helps with the students to put themselves in assignments. So here's some of the key points for curriculum design that I'm just kind of summarizing what I've already said before I get into examples here. Class culture is huge. Think about the micro interactions. It's everyday stuff. And this identity control theory is really, really widely researched. So it's really, really legit. Think about all identity types. All 4 identity types should be explored. Statuses and styles. Try to connect things to their personal lives and make sure you're a learner too. You're learning about them. Show that active interest and expeditionary learning. And I'll show you an example of that in a second, but it's anything where the student is taking a project, doing it outside of the school, inside of the school, really just showing that ownership. And I have living and breathing curriculum here. It's like, maybe a student can make an update to an assignment. Maybe they can update the syllabus, and just showing that this is their school too. It's their environment as well. All right. So some examples here that I have for you guys, and you're going to brainstorm one maybe in a second here, based on what I have shown you. So I don't know if you guys have health class. It's like, we have phys ed and then health, and it's just a place for kids to learn about health and well-being and things like that. So this could take place in any type of personal development class. So if the goal is to build identity exploration, we can hypothesize or imagine a first assignment called State of the Identities, where we have categories for students to fill out. what are their different role identities? What are their group identities, social and personal identities? And really force them to think, how often are you in this role? How often is this identity reinforced? How important is it to you? What does it mean that that this role is so prominent in your life? What would your life be like without it? Things like this for all the identities, just to really get them to be conscious and aware of these things. Because again, I don't think they get enough direct, explicit instruction on what identity is and why their emotions might be dependent on this stuff. So then from there, that's the introductory assignment. You can pick one identity to focus on, or you can combine two. For example, you could pick group identity, and for what does it mean to be a Murray? That fits the transformative pedagogy, because now I'm learning about the student. Now I'm learning what it means to be in that family and to represent that group. You could combine two identities, gender and culture in this example. How is masculinity similar and different in France and America, or something like this? It could be quite interesting for them to do. And then you have exploratory exercises. They could do research on the internet. They could do interviews, film review. And then that transformational element, it's got to be them having impact, them teaching you, the teacher, or others. I said they could present to other kids or do some publishing or something like this. It really that assertive, this is me, commitment. Remember from the stages, there's exploration, then commitment, right? So it's that sealing and the commitment piece. One more here before I put you in your groups. Civic identity unit. This is actually one that I taught in Chicago that went pretty well. So the goal was for students to improve their community in a meaningful and measurable way. And they are exploring their role as a change maker in the community, or their civic identity. And so the end goal was to develop a community improvement plan, organize people in the community to volunteer, make change. And so I didn't provide them with really any questions or any answers. I just said, here's the project and here's some of the elements. So here's some of the elements. Survey the community about what their interests and needs are, your neighbors and things like that. How do you need to improve? Present the plan to the class. So you've got public speaking. You still have your academics in these units. That's the thing. You've got public speaking. You've got language, grammar, all of these things. Writing, write a letter to the newspaper. So I did all of these things. Advertise in the community to build coalition, and then implement the plan and run an event. So they're taking on an issue that they believe in. So it's all about their identity, they care about, it's their community. And the transformation, again, it's nothing is prescribed here. I really enjoyed it. It was the first time actually that I did something like this where I didn't provide any questions or have any specific answers. And I liked it. And I thought that it went pretty well. All right, so I'm going to upload a file here. Well, I'll take questions actually right now as well, as I upload this document.
Greg, there are a couple of questions in the chat already.
Oh, cool. Let me just upload the document and then I'll answer those questions. All right, so you guys should see that PDF that I just sent to the chat. Take about 7-8 minutes right now to look it over, and I'll answer some questions here. Different spaces, different identities. What kinds of exploration? So yeah, so exploration, back to that one from before, what kind of exploration would you recommend for healthy development? Basically everything I've just said here. It would be interesting if Hannah, if you still have a question after what I've said. You have to have the healthy attachment. It's really big to have healthy attachment, to have close relationships with adults, just to be seen. If people are changing, I can't emphasize how important it is. They need to be seen and acknowledged and verified. So even just writing them a little note or saying one thing in the hallway, things like that. It's that attachment piece is big, plus all this stuff that I just mentioned in the curriculum. Is the parental control culture specific? That's a really good question. I can double check in the literature where I read that. It was showing up everywhere in the literature that parental control, negatively associated with identity development. So, and it's kind of common sense too, I think, from people I know, like I see it. What are some signs of unhealthy identity development, such as diffusion? Really good question. These are the students who are really not engaging. If you were to do some of these assignments, they wouldn't do it. They would not complete it with fidelity. And they also, they externalize. They don't make commitments. So they'll externalize, their locus of control. So I'm trying to think of an example. Just putting off. So like, you know, I don't want a career, or I don't want to define myself right now. You know, it's that putting it off. It's the very uncomfortable. That's the diffusions. They really don't like approaching these issues because of the uncertainty. So anytime you see a student who's really not handling the uncertainty well, it's time to spend more. You spend more extra time with that student to guide them. And it's a matter of attachment, according to psychologists. It's a matter of attachment, and so just really seeing them and providing that safety is good. So that's Allison's questions too. Typical signs of the rate of progress being too fast or too slow. Emotions, emotions. It's huge. So if it's too slow, the student will be lethargic. They'll be depressed. They'll be hopeless and discouraged. And that's where you scaffold a little bit to show them how far you've come. You haven't met your goal yet. You haven't really explored that much yet, but just reinforcing. If it's too fast, I don't know what too fast is. Maybe you mean, like, usually people are happy if they explore and it's going fast, and they change and it's going faster than expected. But too fast could mean that they're not exploring enough. Maybe they're making a commitment and they're not really thinking about it. So that would put them in the normative style, processing style, where they're just basing on emotion, and they're not really thinking through. They didn't do the homework. They're not providing a bunch of evidence or support for why they've chosen this identity, why they've chosen to represent themselves like this. That could really signify that they should do a little more exploration. All right. So yeah, so if you can't see you should hopefully be able to see the assignment. Basically, it's 3 questions to get your juices flowing, to get your brain primed for a conversation with some colleagues here. And I'll give you guys just some time right now to take a look at that. And the question box is still open if you have any questions.